Hey everybody, Brian Hogley with SideChannel. Welcome back to CISO Life. Today, very excited to have a special guest in studio. Well, not actually the studio. This is like in office, but close enough because that's where I am. So hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. Everyone stayed safe. I have with me George Gerchow. He is the CISO and VP at SumoLogic. I want to welcome into the CISO Life studio. George, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
We were having some fun setting up for the video, and it's turns out I just learned today. I was today years old when I learned that George was the CISO. That's how much I look at my prep notes. So it's very fitting that George is on CISO Live. George, I mean, here's a great question to always start out with. Like, God, why did you pick this profession? I mean, people have heard my reasons for getting into the CISO life and having been a CISO. And now running a CISO company and obviously everything, all the fun things that go along with that. But why did you pick this profession? How did you come into this?
Yeah, so I didn't pick it at all. Like most of us, I got started in IT. And back then, showing my age, it was really no SOC, no security department. It was more risk-based reporting into legal. And then I just found myself doing like all the security things, no blank admin passwords, no DBA passwords that were password, then patching systems. And then when security started kind of happening, I was like, seems like fun. So I started getting more and more involved, firewalls, everything else. And then my career took all kinds of crazy turns. I went into software as a systems engineer and then did channels and product management for many, many years, and then founded the Center for Policy and Compliance at VMware. And then ended up at Sumo, and it just was all the right fit at the right time to have both security and IT at Sumo.
Nice. What do you think was the, like, not the defining moment, but, there's always that part in your career where you're like, man, I'm so glad I had that job because I learned so much that I use that now either in the role that I'm in, or I know how to better work with that group and those people. Like I can point back to early days at my college help desk. Like, I know that helped me define, like, what actually is a user experience, right? How does the user, what do they expect out of their laptop to work, their applications to work? What are they expecting out of IT? Of course, half of it was like myth. They're like, it doesn't work. I don't know what's going on. Make the magic, do the thing. And you're like, that's not how this works. But that's how they perceive it, right? So like later on in my life, I was like, oh, okay. That's how some users think. Not all users, but like that's how some users think. I have to remember that, and I have to kind of act accordingly. What was that role for you?
Yeah, so it's funny because I always was user friendly. Even though like a lot of IT people I worked with were just rude animals,
Sure.
Man. I love them, but they treated end users like crap. ID 10T, PEPCAC, problem just between keyboard and chair, all that good stuff. I never did that. Like I was always like in such learning mode that part came easy. The biggest lesson in my career for sure came in sales. I started off, like I said, as a systems engineer, and then within 6 months, I ran a worldwide team of sales engineers, and I was horrible, Brian. Like I was the worst manager of people that size globally you've ever seen. Like no process, no nothing behind it. I was like, just do what I do, and I was a former user of the product. And it just taught me a lot about myself. I removed myself from the role within a year. Because I was like, man, I'm just not, I need to go back to the drawing board. Like software is a whole different world. It was the biggest lesson I ever learned. And I think when I came back the next time around and managed a large team, it showed me that I really had to like put people first. It wasn't about me anymore. I was always good at the evangelism stuff, but put people first all the way. And that's where your priority's at. So that was the biggest lesson learned for me.
That's good, man. I mean, I've run into a few folks. I can name a few people who have done the sales role in their career and then went into being a CISO. I can point to Mark Sutton. He's the CISO at Bain. He was at Dell, SecureWorks. He was at SecureWorks, right? Did sales at SecureWorks, knew how to like sell, and they're like, Mark's a great guy. Hi, Mark. He's a Boston guy. I'll see him this week, or last week, depending on when this video comes out. But anyway, did that, and then now he's a CISO for a large private equity firm. I conversely never sold, always a practitioner. Then started a firm where I had to sell, right? Like CEO's job is like you got to sell. So it's great to hear, you're like,
Yep.
oh, I ran a team. I also did sales. I knew I wasn't good at running the team. So I learned. So I did better the next time I ran a team. Not a lot of people pivot. I've heard, I'm sure you've heard like horror stories like that manager was terrible. And then like 5 years later, you're like, people are still talking about how terrible that manager is. Like, did they, like, no one changed them? Like, they didn't get better. Why not?
Brian, it's the worst though, because, and this happens all the time. I see it in my career where, like you'll ask someone for a reference, or they'll be like, hey, I see you're
Mm-hmm.
working with so and so. And then they'll say something about them based off of 10 years ago. And it's like, my guy, my gal, things change, man. Like you cannot put people in a box for where they were
Right.
at a certain time. Everyone changes. Most people grow. And it drives me absolutely nuts when people do that. Because if this was like that role I had was
Okay.
2004. I mean, come on.
That was a
That
while
was
ago.
18
That's
years
been a
ago,
minute.
Yeah, and I haven't been in sales
Sure.
a long time since then. And so, if that's the way that people still look at me, and then that would just be crazy because of how much has happened, in my career since then. So,
Well,
but
I'm,
it is
I'm
what it
sure
is,
people
right?
still look at you that way. People still look at me that way because I'm sure you get those recruiter emails that are like, hey, I see you have experience doing sales and all this stuff. And you're like, what database are you reading? Like that was 15 years ago. I don't want that job anymore. I'm not even qualified for the job I used to be qualified for. Like I can't do that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, there's just so much information, especially if in the age of the internet and all that. There's so much old information out there where
Right.
people can do that. But hey, like I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change one single thing. Like all those experiences and a lot of the trials and tribulations that I learned managing people at a software company, because it is different. Being in software is much different than being
Sure.
on the commercial side of things. Like I was always very comfortable on the commercial side of things, and software is so fast paced. And like you said, now you're a
Right.
CEO, you get it. It's all about selling. Everyone in software needs to be
Right.
selling
So
all
let's
the
talk
time.
about that. Your role as a CISO for SumoLogic, right? Like just high level, what is SumoLogic all about? I know what it is, but like let's give our viewers like the inside, like what is your focus as a corporation? And then I want to get into what are you doing for that company? I'd love to dig into some areas. So what's SumoLogic all about?
Yeah, so Sumo Logic is look, it's logs with deep logging analytics, which is such a terrible thing to say. Like, I don't know when logs became such a bad thing because as a
Right.
practitioner, right? The minute something goes wrong,
Yep.
where do you go? Logs. And so we just do deep log analytics, 100% in the cloud, multi-tenant, all run off of AWS, what allows us to scale insanely. And then we put layers on top of it of observability as well as a cloud SIM solution as well too. My responsibility, I'm lucky enough to serve and support a pretty big team. It's called the Risk, which is real estate, IT, security,
Oh,
and compliance. And so think about
yep.
a SOC and a NOC. We took those and combined them into one. Also run the audit team. So every certification of the plan that you can think of from FedRAMP, ISO 27001, SOC 2, Type 2, PCI, HIPAA
Right.
audited every year. List goes on and on. We're a public facing company, so
Yep.
SOX as well too. So I have that team. And my favorite part, Brian, though, is definitely without a doubt the real estate team. And we use our product to do everything. And that's my favorite part is drinking your own champagne. Like whenever I talk to another company that I'm going to partner with, whether it's for single sign-on, MFA, vulnerability management, whatever, I love to hear how they use
Mm-hmm.
their own product. Because last thing I want to do is go over to your house, Brian, and you're eating
Right.
something different than what you're serving me, man. And so like that's always a goal of mine, no matter whether it's at VMware, startup, EMC, or Sumo, is drink your own champagne, like be a center of excellence for whatever it is that you are
Got it.
peddling, and pushing
I,
out to
I love
people.
that. I don't want to be dismissive on the compliment here, but I like on everything else you said was awesome. But the fact that you're not just drinking the Kool-Aid, like you in your house, you guys drink your own champagne. Good for you. Good for you.
Totally.
That's awesome. I'm stealing that.
I'm a bubbly guy.
So you're a
For sure.
so I mean you're essentially you're compliance play, right? You're a security tool. You're just
Mhm.
log aggregation could be used for development, could be used for systems administration, could be anything that somebody goes, oh my God, what happened? Let's go back in time, right? And see what happened. And then come out of that analysis with a plan to do whatever, right? We developed something and pushed some wrong code to production or one application to production. Let's look at the logs and figure out why that broke, right? there was a security incident. Let's figure out what bad guy did what bad thing at the wrong time or the right time, depending on how you look at it. Or even just compliance, right? SEC, FTC, you name a 3-letter regulation or 4-letter regulation or 4-letter word out there that ends up being like, hey, guess what? You have to log everything. You're sitting there going, fine, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it. So you get, I mean, you play kind of across the whole board, but you're the CISO, you're the security guy. You're in charge of security for that tool. I mean, like, okay, one, does Avanta or Gartner let you go to their conferences without having to pay because you're technically a vendor, even though you are a CISO? I got to ask you that first.
Well, they always want me to go to their stuff for sure. And I'll give, Gartner their due. Like they put us in a couple of magic quadrants, one for observability and one for SIM. But I'm really careful about where I go, Brian, and where I spend my time. You got to be, or else, you're going to burn out. You can't be everywhere all at once. And so as much as I admire those companies, I haven't been to their conferences in a while for sure. And last use case you missed, IT, man. Like if there's a system that goes down because of memory, CPU utilization, or there's an outage, first place you go, logs.
So you mentioned burnout, and I like going to some conferences, not all of them. And, I like Gartner to, a good degree. They put one of our platforms in a hype cycle. I applaud them for that. Thank you, Claude Mandy for that one. But at the same time, like Avanta, which is now owned by Gartner, kicked me out the second I stopped being the CISO for Fortune 500, and the following day I became technically a vendor. Somehow I lost all my subject matter expertise. I wrote a book on NIST CSF, and they're like, yeah, but now you're a vendor, you're not an SME, you can't talk here anymore. I was like, okay, those are the rules. Now I understand the rules. But so like conferences are nice because you can go commiserate with your peers, you can learn some other stuff, you can see some of their cool tech, you can talk to hopefully all your peers. Wherever I'm in the Boston area, so I get to loop in and talk to the whole Boston community. I didn't even catch George. Where do you hail from?
Yeah. So I live in Colorado. I've been in Colorado for a long time, but funny enough, I went to school in Boston. I did a 2-year stint at Berkeley College of Music.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of.
It's a fun place. So I know the Northeast has got a great CISO community. I know Denver's got a pretty good community as well because I've heard the stories. Mm-hmm. There's no pictures. There's just good stories.
And the Valley does. It's funny though, because so that's a really funny point you just made, because I feel like I know a lot of CISOs in Denver, but I don't interact with them as much because my company's out of Silicon Valley. So they're like, oh, he's one of those guys. So look, like this whole thing you're talking about, I'm dying over here because it's so true. It's like, what makes you any different now that you're on the vendor side than where you were before? Like all that knowledge is still there. Like you just said, you wrote a book on cybersecurity framework, which is the gold standard on board presentations, by the way, for almost every CISO on the planet. So what changed? That kind of perception and like those little pockets, I think are weird, man. Like we need to cross-pollinate more across industries. And
I agree. Like we're as security professionals, we all love each other, rely on each other, but somehow we're like treated like internal audit by like the rest of the world. Like, we need to exist, but you don't like us. Like that's just how it is. So we have to commiserate and like lean on each other. So to what we want to talk about, like burnout, like who am I going to go? Like I can talk. I love my wife, right? Been married for 16 plus years. Honey, don't hold me to that number, but like it's 06, whatever 06 was, minus the carry the one. We've been married a long time. Beautiful 12-year-old daughter. But I can talk to her and she now understands what I do. I mean, I used to be in the DoD where like I couldn't talk about my work. Now she actually understands what I do. I can talk about my job. She gets it, but she's not in my profession. Like she's a vet tech. Like I don't know how to talk about microbes and dogs and all that stuff. So like I'm gonna be drawn to wanting to talk to people who understand the problems I'm running into. Like, oh my God, my board's so demanding. My wife's gonna be like, honey, it's okay. Like another CISO's gonna be like, oh, I've been through that. I know exactly what you're talking about. So we have to commiserate with our friends. Where do we see them? Usually conferences or like, hopefully get-togethers. But I mean, like, is that an outlet that you wish you had, you don't have access to, or you do have, and you're glad you have access to when you are starting to get to that point in your job where you're like, is this worth it? Do I even want to be in this field? Like, do I even want to, like everybody gets to that point in this role as a CISO where you're just like, screw this. I'm just going to go become a farmer. Like,
I think that's more never now because, like you have like the whole thing going on with like Joe
don't
Sullivan
get
and
me
the
started.
DOJ and all that crap happening. I know, me too. But I'm glad that I have like safe places to go. Like 2 weeks ago, I went to an in-person IANS conference, it's
Yep,
an
yep.
Institute of Applied Network Security, and got to see like a bunch of CISOs out in New York that I haven't
Oh,
shaken their
nice.
hands in a while. Some of them since they've
Oh,
gotten
wow.
their job, and then a nice happy hour afterwards. And I don't know, it was good. It was a lot of like bitching and complaining about like the new cybersecurity rules getting put out by the SEC, FedRAMP moving to Rev 5, like all this stuff that you're right. Like you can have a significant other that will just be like,
Yeah,
get over it, have another slice of tea. But like if you and I got together, it'd be like, oh my God, let's add a JMO to that beer.
I've done that. I've done that. Shout out to my neighbor Tim. I'm sorry about your hot tub still. Really sorry about that, Tim and Chrissy. Spilled one.
Um, That's hilarious. But I'm glad to have those places. I really am, like this week's reInvent in
Nice.
Las Vegas, and so, but those are a little bit different. Again, you got to kind of like pick and choose like what you're going to do. And then for me, it's who you're going to
Right.
see around the
Oh
conference,
my
like
God.
RSA.
Yeah.
RSA, yeah, I was glad to go back, which I thought I'd never say that again. And then when I got there, it was like, I'm just going to enjoy like the
Mm.
little happy hours, and going to all the little places around Moscone, but try not to go in that
It's
much,
really funny. I
you know?
hear more and more people year after year saying, "Oh, I go to RSA. Oh, I go to Black Hat. Oh, I go to reInvent, but I go to just reconnect with my friends." And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
hold on. So, one, great. Think that's awesome. Everybody congregates in one spot. That's a nice, probably security threat that DHS is probably just going to be like, oh my God, there goes like the top 500 security minds in the US. Probably a bad idea.
We thought
I'm on
about
a
that.
list
You're
right now
right.
because I said those words out loud. But like, if we're going and like just meeting with our friends, do our companies know that? And is it just a boondoggle?
Mhm.
And honestly, if most of the and I mean, I talked to some of the I talked to some like really other high caliber people such as yourself who are like CISOs at very significant organizations, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, really great startups. And that's the same thing. Like, I go to reconnect with my friends. It's like, well, who's actually going to the conference? Like, if all these booths are set up, who's stopping by those booths? Because is it like, I gotta wonder at some point, like, where is the actual ROI for the people going? Because I've thought about this. I wouldn't say, even if I was 10 times larger than our business was today, reInvent would not be on my list. RSA would not be on my list to go set up a booth at. I'm like, who would be coming by? Everybody I'd want to talk to would be the people I'd want to go meet out at the Lux lobby bar, afterwards.
Well, I think it's like a two-way thing, So you said a lot in there that I want to address. The first one is I don't think companies would ever look at it as a boondoggle because you got to crank out
Sure.
meetings during the day. Look, I think the CISO positions changed dramatically to where you have to have some
Oh
sales
yeah.
skills. You really do. And especially when you're in software, you got to talk about, like we said, drink your own champagne and all that. So the way that I usually do it is like RSA is a great example. Ton of meetings during the day, analysts at the booth, customers at the booth, and which, by the way,
Sure.
you make new friends because like you might meet a new CISO from another company. They just wants to meet another CISO. And then it's like, oh, wow, this person's really cool. So from now on, this is someone I'm going to get together with. So you sort of do as much of that as you can. And then definitely meeting up with your friends is where the ROI comes in as well, because you're getting to understand what they're working on. I mean, God, Brian, I have really good friends in this industry that unfortunately I'll go 6 months to a year
Mm.
without talking to them. And it's a shame because we're just moving at lightning pace. And so I know, like at reInvent right now, I'm going to see like the CISO of MGM Studios and the CISO of AWS and people like that I want to connect with. But picking and choosing is the right thing. Like I don't go to Black Hat. I haven't got a
Yeah.
Black Hat for years. It's like one, Black Hat to me became like a big marketing thing. No offense to anyone, but it kind of did. I like B-sides, I like DEF CON, but it was like, I'm not going to Vegas in August
Yeah.
and doing that anymore. I could see those same
Right.
people at RSA. reInvent is just, well, I mean,
Yeah.
60,000 people there, and so 60,000 people there, cloud first company like ours, 100% in
Kind of
AWS,
makes sense.
you almost have to be there.
Is Brandon still at MGM?
Yeah.
Is that him?
No, so now it's a guy called John Wisniewski, which, by the way, like, great dude. Like, you ever want to laugh and, like, have a good conversation with a really good CISO, that dude's one. He came from DoD space too, so he was the deputy CISO of the Air Force.
Okay, very cool. We'll put in a good word for him. Have him come on
Good
CISO
dude.
Life. We'll do this.
Yeah, totally. I will. I love the guy.
So I
He's a
see
good
you've
shit.
got snowboards behind you. Do you ride?
Yeah, nonstop. I've already been out. It's grotesque, but I've been
I
out
hate
10
you.
times this year. Over 70,000 vertical feet.
So my CTO and I lived in Boulder after high school for a number of years. And then I moved back to New York. And I was like, I go riding like maybe like twice a year, but I don't really consider it anything. It's pretty sad. It's just west. I miss Summit County and everything that goes along with up there. So
I live in Summit. I live in
very nice,
Colorado.
very nice. So how much does I know my answer is probably the same as yours, but we got to hear you say it. How much does physical activity play into your just general mental health and happiness and like being able to decompress?
Brian, it's huge. I mean, it is just such so going back to like the burnout thing, like one of the things that I have done for a lot of my team members, especially on the security side, was got them Apple Watches. And after I got them Apple Watches for like doing a great job on certain things, it was like, now we're going to compete. We're not going to really compete, but we're going to look at each other's calories. And at first it was so funny, the reaction, because they'd be like, I don't want this dude to see that I'm working out in the middle of the day. And I'm like, I want to see that, because then I know that you're taking time for yourself in the middle of the day, morning. I don't care. As long as you get your stuff done. And so I'm going to go on a tangent here for a second, because I get so tired of people talking about, is productivity up or down, or the pandemic and everyone's working remote, and how do I know what they're doing or not? It's like the same way you always have. KPIs, OKRs, stay in contact with your team, set proper goals, and you'll know. It doesn't matter if you're in office or not. It really just does not matter. So when I see them doing things like that, I'm just like, oh, that's wonderful, because I do it. I mean, all the time. This morning, like I have a really nice gym here in Silverton, Colorado. Yes, we talk about Summit County to make you jealous. I went this morning, like at 9 o'clock in the morning, and was there for an hour. Took a call right afterwards from the rec center, but I did something for myself, which allows me to be better for others. And physical activity to me is like one of the things that just keeps me going, keeps me
That's good to hear. That's super good to hear. I don't think enough people either they're not hearing it or they're not taking that advice to like do something for yourself, exercise. Like I will badly quote or paraphrase Legally Blonde, unfortunately one of my favorite movies, right? It's like, exercise creates endorphins. Endorphins makes you happy. Happy people just don't kill their husbands. But I'm a sucker for pop culture and just stupid movies. But like endorphins make you happy, right? I mean, like even if you're not losing weight, like working out will make you happy. And it doesn't, I think a lot of people stop. They'll just be like, oh, working out means going to the gym and being on a program and doing all this. Like, no. Working out could start as much as like going for a 1 mile walk every day and then a 2 mile walk every day. You don't have to run. You just get out and do something. Like, I knew a guy who was huge. Like I used to do triathlons and big into that space. I've tried to give up on the fact that there is no real snow in the Northeast. I knew a guy, he counted the time that he like cleaned his house. Like when he was vacuuming, he was like, this is exercise. And like he worked it into his routine because he was like just active. He was just not sitting at his desk. He was doing something. It's like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to like, I think a lot of people get held up because they're like, oh, there's this definition of what working out is. It's like, no, it's not. Just go do something. I see too many people in IT that are sedentary. They sit in a chair all day. They get out of their chair, they go home, they sit on a couch, right? Like you're constantly going from like seat to seat. You're not doing enough. So that's really good to hear.
Get outside, man. Get outside. It's like, even for me, like, I mean, like Summit County, it's rather cold. It's like 30 degrees today. Big snowstorm coming in, so I'm excited about that. But I do like a lot of one-on-ones when I'm on walks.
Yep.
I encourage my management team to do the same. It's like, you don't have to be on Zoom and video. Just get on the phone, and chat things out that way. And so I think you're entirely right. Like breaking up the routine is a good thing. And by the way, I see the same. I'm obsessed right now with cordless vacuum cleaners. Like, I mean, I'm like, vacuuming everything inside. Like the cat's been vacuumed like 3 times today, I guarantee it. And he's like, no, when he never sees it coming. So those little things matter, man. They really do.
It's I think it helps kind of put off burnout. It kind of just sets things, nicely for you to be successful in the job. Like decompress, or even just get analog, right? Just step away from a computer and a screen. Don't be on your phone. Well, George, listen, man, this has been amazing discussion and having you on. So happy that you chose to come on. Thank you for coming on CISO Live. Any parting words besides making me really jealous that you're probably going to be writing some fresh POW tomorrow?
I think the parting words for your audience, look, I just made a friend. I believe we have a lot in common. And so you're someone I'm going to follow and stay in touch with. So thanks for having me. But the other one too is like this whole path to the CISO thing that you did at the beginning, which I love that question. When you look at yourself and you're going through your career, especially early on, sky's the limit. Like you can go in any direction. Just because you were in sales doesn't mean that you can't be a product manager, doesn't mean that you can't be an executive. Like just always be curious and then always challenge yourself to be able to attain whatever it is that you want to achieve in your personal life and your professional life. I think it's super important. Too many people put themselves into a box. We talked about other people putting you in a box. Don't do it to yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, George Gerchow, CISO at SumoLogic. Thank you so much for being on. We'll look forward to having you on, hopefully again.
Yeah,
well, folks,
love it.
Brian Hogley with CISO Life. Thanks again for watching. We hope you had an enjoyable time. As always, be safe out there, stay good, and we'll catch you next time. All right? Take care.